It was the first warm Saturday of spring in the small town of Elkridge, Oregon. The morning mist still clung to the grass, and the trails smelled of soaked bark and last year's forgotten leaves. 16-year-old Ellie Harper tied her hair into a loose braid, slipped on her black hoodie, and told her mother she was heading out for a short walk. Nothing unusual. Just the Elkwood Forest Trail, a place locals had walked for decades. Her mother, Dana Harper, barely noticed. She stood in the kitchen, groggy from another restless night, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, eyes fixed on the gray sky outside. The front door clicked shut behind Ellie. That was the last sound Dana would ever hear from her daughter. The Elkwood Trail was only 10 minutes from their house. A narrow, winding path carved through thick forest, known for its peaceful silence and towering evergreens. Families often walked their dogs there. Couples jogged, students hiked. It felt safe, familiar, but something about the dense canopy and endless shadows always unsettled. Dana, she never liked that trail. Too quiet. Too alone. As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to dip, Dana looked at the clock. Then again. Still no sign of Ellie. She dialed her phone. Straight to voicemail. She told herself not to worry. Maybe the battery died. Maybe she ran into friends. Maybe she just lost track of time. But when darkness set in and Ellie's bed remained untouched, Dana's stomach tightened into knots. Panic crept in like water seeping under a locked door. By 8:23 p.m., she called the police. The officers arrived quickly. They asked the standard questions. Was Ellie upset? Did she have a boyfriend? Had she ever run away before? Dana answered with confusion. Ellie had seemed quiet lately, more withdrawn, maybe, but that was just being a teenager, right? Still, something about that morning replayed in her mind again and again. The stillness in Ellie's eyes. The way she didn't say goodbye. Search began before midnight. Volunteers, neighbors, and local deputies scoured the trail, their flashlights weaving through the trees like restless ghosts. They called her name, checked side trails, poked through underbrush. But they found nothing. No shoe, no jacket, no sign of a struggle. The path was undisturbed, as if she had stepped off it and dissolved into the woods. By sunrise, Dana stood. Outside the trailhead, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her body trembling beneath her coat. The search expanded. Drones flew overhead. Dogs were brought in. A nearby creek was dredged. Helicopters circled above. Still nothing? No footprints, no scent? No answers. Each hour stretched longer than the last. News spread quickly. Local papers ran headlines. Teen girl missing on Elkwood Trail. Her school held a moment of silence. Strangers started dropping off flowers near the trail entrance, but the days passed, then weeks. Still no Ellie. Dana stopped sleeping. Her appetite vanished. She moved like a shadow through the house, listening for a door that wouldn't open, a voice that wouldn't return. She stopped returning phone calls. She barely spoke to anyone, except to answer the occasional knock from detectives who came with fewer updates each time. Posters were stapled to every lamppost, every coffee shop corkboard, every gas station window. Her name, her smile, her last known outfit. But as summer approached, the corners of the flyers curled from the weather. People walked past them now without looking. The town, in time, moved on, but Dana didn't. She still kept Ellie's room exactly as it had been, unmade. Bed, books on the knitstand, a photo of the two of them taped to the mirror. She still walked the trail sometimes, always alone, always scanning the trees, listening for something, anything, hoping the forest might give something back. She remembered how the police had scaled back their efforts after the first month. How? The detectives' voices had changed. How the town began to treat her like a wound they couldn't help but look away from. Parents avoided eye contact in the grocery store. Teachers stopped calling to check in. People spoke of Ellie in the past tense. Dana never did. She believed her daughter hadn't vanished without reason. Something happened on that trail. Someone was there. Someone who took something from her that could never be returned. But no matter how many times she asked questions, knocked on doors, called local reporters, no one had answers. And eventually no one seemed to care. Then, 3 years later, almost to the day, her dog Max disappeared. It was a stormy night, thunder overhead, rain lashing against the windows. Dana assumed he'd run off, chasing a raccoon or frightened by the thunder. She was too tired to care. Too numb to feel anything anymore, but 2 days later, Max returned. Limping, drenched in mud, shaking from exhaustion, and clutched in his mouth was a necklace, a small silver chain. Ellie's, the same one she had been wearing the day she vanished. Dana dropped to her knees. The forest hadn't forgotten, after all. About 3 years is a long time in a small town. Long enough for new stores to open, for teenagers to graduate, for people to stop looking at the flyers curled on telephone poles and start forgetting the girl who used to smile from them. Ellie Harper became a ghost story, a name people lowered their voices to say, the kind of tragedy people folded away neatly in the back of their minds. But not Dana. For Dana Harper, time had not passed at all. Her world had frozen on that day. In March, when Ellie stepped onto the Elkwood Trail and never returned. Everything after that moment became noise, background static behind the single, aching question that never left her. What happened to my daughter? The police had done their best, or so they claimed. After 6 months of no leads, no suspects, no new information, the case was labeled a presumed abduction. No further evidence, no body, no closure, just empty files and unanswered calls. They offered sympathy and recommended therapy. A kind way of saying, let go. Dana did and single quotes dude. She stopped working. Stopped attending community events. She became that woman people crossed the street to avoid. That woman who still asked questions, that woman who couldn't let go. She wore the same coat every day, the same weary look in her eyes, and walked the trail every week with a notepad and a fading photograph. Hope didn't leave her, it just changed shape. Became obsession. Her husband, Noah, had lasted a year. He tried. Sat beside her in meetings, walked with her in silence, pretended to believe they would get her back. But grief does not always bind people. Sometimes it splinters them. The silence between them became unbearable. He left one quiet Sunday morning, saying he needed to breathe. He moved 2 towns over. Found peace somewhere else. Dana never blamed him. She barely noticed. Now she lived alone. In the same house with the same wallpaper and the same unopened door to Ellie's bedroom. Her only company was Max, the dog they had adopted together, the one Ellie had begged for on her 13th birthday. He had once been energetic and wild. Now he mirrored Dana, slow, tired, alert to silence. Weeks ago, Max had vanished too. She had left the back gate unlatched during a storm. A flash of lightning, a crash of thunder. And by the time she realized it, he was gone. She searched the woods, called his name, left food on the porch. But after 3 days, she gave up. The forest had taken something else from her, and she braced for another absence to swallow her whole. Until this morning. It was early, and the rain had stopped. She stepped out to check the mailbox when she heard the low whimper. Max was dragging himself up the porch steps, soaked and shivering, his leg bleeding and belly matted with leaves and dirt. In his mouth, clutched so tightly it had left imprints. On his teeth was something cold and silver, Ellie's necklace, the same necklace she had worn that day. The one Dana had searched for desperately after she vanished. The one not found in the woods or in her room. A simple silver chain with a tiny bird charm. Dana dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she took it from Max's jaw. It was real, tangible, unmistakable. She didn't cry. Not immediately. Her body went numb first, like her heart was trying to catch up to what her eyes already knew. It was Ellie's, but how? Where had Max found it? And why now, 3 years later? She carried Max inside, cleaned his wounds, and wrapped him in blankets. Then she placed the necklace on the table beneath the kitchen light. It sparkled faintly, a cruel reminder and an impossible clue all at once. Her mind churned. Questions clashed against each other like waves in a storm. She called the local police, gave a short, breathless explanation, and they promised to send someone. But she could hear it in their voices, the hesitation, the doubt. They had already put Ellie in a box labeled unsolved. For them, this was just a ghost reappearing. But for Dana, it was the first real threat in years. News of Max's return spread by afternoon. Neighbors whispered. A few even came to the porch, awkward and curious, asking if it was true. Dana didn't answer. She stood at the window, watching the tree line beyond the trail. Something had changed. The forest wasn't done with her yet, and then she remembered something else, a path deeper into the woods, one rarely used. Ellie had once mentioned it offhandedly a year before she vanished. There's a hidden place back there, she had said. A place nobody really goes. Dana had forgotten that. Until now, she picked up the necklace again and stared at it, fingers curling tight around the cold metal. If Max had found it, then something or someone was still out there. Tomorrow, she would go back to the trail. This time, she wouldn't come back until she found something. The sky had turned black by evening, thick clouds pressing low over the town like something was being smothered. Rain tapped the windows in uneven rhythms, and the distant sound of thunder echoed through the hills. Dana hadn't moved from the kitchen table in hours. The necklace lay in front of her, still wet, still cold, still real. She turned it over a dozen times, fingers brushing the tiny bird charm, tracing the delicate clasp. It was unmistakably Ellie's. Dana remembered the day she bought it, how Ellie had begged for it in the window of a small antique shop. It looks like freedom, she'd said. Dana had laughed at the time. Now it felt like a cruel irony. The house was silent except for the ticking clock and the occasional creak of wood shifting in the walls. Max slept on a towel in the corner, still trembling, his bandaged legs stretched awkwardly in front of him. His eyes flicked open every now and then like he sensed her watching. He hadn't made a sound since she brought him in. She couldn't stop staring at the necklace. It didn't make sense. That chain had disappeared the same day Ellie did. The police had searched her room, her backpack, the woods. It hadn't been found with anything, not a single item of clothing, not her phone, not even her shoelaces. But now, after all this time, Max had come home with it tangled in his collar, like it had just been waiting somewhere close. She had checked the collar earlier, looking for signs it had been tampered with, but the leather was worn the way it always had been, familiar, soft, a little cracked. There were no fresh tears, no new holes. It was as if the necklace had slipped into it on its own. But that was impossible. Dana tried to retrace the logic. Max had vanished 3 weeks ago. He hadn't gone far before, never left the yard. When he did wander, he always returned by nightfall. But this time he hadn't. She had assumed the worst. Coyotes, a car. Hunger, the same black hole that had taken Ellie, but Max had come back. Not just alive, with a message? And now, everything inside her stirred. She stood slowly, picked up the necklace, and walked over to where Max lay. His head lifted weakly, eyes searching her face. She knelt beside him and placed her hand gently on his fur. It was damp, matted, smelled faintly of ash and dirt. She didn't speak at first, just breathed, trying to gather the words. He blinked once, slow, like he understood. The memory of Ellie holding him as a puppy flashed in Dana's mind, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck, her face buried in his fur, whispering secrets only he would ever hear. Something about that memory cracked Dana open in a way nothing else had. She leaned in close, her voice barely a breath. "I know you saw something," she whispered. Max didn't move, but his eyes stayed fixed on hers. And for the first time in 3 years, Dana felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Direction. This wasn't over. The necklace hadn't just resurfaced by accident. Max had found it. That meant it was still out there, somewhere, waiting, and she would follow that trail. Even if no one else believed her, she stood feeling the cold chains still clutched in her hand. Tomorrow she would return to the woods, not the public trail, the deeper part. The one Ellie had once mentioned, long ago. There's a place nobody really goes. Dana hadn't understood it then, but she did now. Outside, the storm was beginning to clear, but the clouds hadn't lifted. The forest beyond the trees was still dark, still waiting, and Dana was done waiting. The sun barely broke through the gray that hung low over Elkwood that morning. Rain had fallen hard the night before, and now the ground steamed under a shroud of rising mist. Dana stood at the edge of the forest, Max beside her, his movements slow, his injured leg dragging slightly. She hadn't stepped foot into Elkwood Forest in over 2 years. Not since the volunteer search parties turned to whispers, and the scent dogs had stopped sniffing. But now, with Ellie's necklace still clenched in her fist like a talisman, Dana crossed the invisible line, back into the place that had taken her daughter. Max limped ahead, nose to the ground, tracking some scent only he could read, his. Muddy paws left marks on the damp leaves, and Dana followed closely, afraid to breathe too loudly. The deeper she walked, the more the world receded. No sound of tires, no voices, just the groaning of trees in the wind and the hush of the earth trying to keep its secrets. The public trail ended behind her long ago. Ahead, the wild began. And still Max walked. She recognized the curve of the terrain, the tilt of the earth beneath her boots. There had been a time when this place had been part of their routine, weekend walks with Ellie, sandwiches packed in foil, laughter carried on the breeze. Now, her steps felt heavier, almost guilty. Branches scratched at her jacket like clawed hands, and the mist clung to her like breath. Max paused, turned his head toward her, then veered sharply left into a denser patch of woods. Dana hesitated. This was not the trail. This was beyond where anyone had searched, overgrown, tangled. Her heart thudded. Still, she pushed forward. Max led her to a small clearing where trees gave way to flattened brush and old, rotting logs. At the far edge stood a crooked structure. A shed, maybe, though half its roof had caved. Time and rot had eaten it. The sight triggered something in her. A flicker, a voice. Ellie, barely 12. "Mom, I saw something weird out there once, near that broken shack." It gave me chills. What kind of something? I don't know. Just, something watching. Dana had dismissed it at the time. Kids. Said things. But now, standing before the same shed, her stomach turned. The shed door sagged on one hinge. A rusted nail protruded where a lock might have once been. Moss crawled up the wooden panels like veins. Max stood near it, tail still, nose trembling. Dana stepped forward. Inside was dark. The smell hit her first. Damp wood, mildew, something long dead. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing collapsed crates, a moldy tarp, and the skeleton of a chair. Scratches marked the far wall, deep, uneven. Not animal, a low sound escaped Max's throat, not a growl. A whimper. Dana crouched to inspect the floor. Under a pile of old rags, something shimmered faintly. She reached out and pulled it. Loose, a button, small, pink, faded, with a tiny silver heart in the center, Ellie's jacket. Dana remembered it vividly, a gift from her late sister. Ellie had loved it. Worn it the day she disappeared. Dana sank back onto her heels. Her mind screamed for logic, but no explanation came. Why was a piece of her daughter's clothing here? Had this place ever been searched? Her throat closed. She wanted to run, but she couldn't move. Her knees wouldn't lift. Her heart beat so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Her fingers curled around the button. Then she noticed something else. Beside the far wall, half covered by rotted canvas, a set of footprints. Bare, small, fresh, as if someone had been there. Recently. She stumbled back into the mist, gasping. Max barked once. Loud, sharp, startling. She turned to look at him. His eyes were fixed in one direction, behind the shed, into another thicket of trees. The barking continued, but it wasn't aggressive. It was calling. Dana didn't think. She ran toward him, and that's when she saw it, another flash of silver, half buried near a root. She dropped to her knees again, brushing away. The dirt, a second necklace, not Ellie's, another name engraved in it. Ava. Her breath hitched. Suddenly the forest didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt like it was listening. As Dana rose, a single thought bloomed in her mind, louder than the wind, louder than the trees creaking above. Ellie wasn't the only one, and Max had just reopened a trail that someone desperately wanted forgotten. Dana parked across the street from Noah's condo, her hands clenched on the steering wheel. The rain had returned, drumming a steady rhythm on the windshield. She hadn't seen him in months, not since the divorce had been finalized. But the diary entries haunted her. He's not who I thought he was. I'm scared. The missing pages burned a hole in her mind. And Max bringing back Ellie's necklace had cracked something wide open. Every thread now pointed backward toward the people closest to her. She climbed the narrow steps, each footfall heavier than the last, and knocked twice. When the door opened, Noah blinked in surprise. Dana? We need to talk, she said. It's about Ellie. He hesitated, then stepped aside. The inside smelled of stale beer and something burnt. Takeout boxes were piled on the kitchen counter. The living room was dim, TV flickering mutely in the background. Noah looked older, more tired. The scruff on his jaw was longer than she remembered, his posture slouched. Life hadn't been kind to either of them since Ellie disappeared. I found her diary, Dana said without sitting. The pages were torn out, but what's left, she was scared of someone. Not a stranger, someone close. Do you know anything? Noah rubbed his face. It's been 3 years, Dana. She stepped closer. 3 years doesn't make silence, right? He exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. She told me someone was following her. Dana's chest constricted. What? He looked away. Just before she disappeared, she came to me, said she thought someone was watching her, especially near. The trail, she mentioned it more than once. Sighed she didn't feel safe. Her voice rose. And you never told me? Noah's face twisted with guilt. She made me promise not to. Said she'd handle it. I didn't want to break her trust. Dana's hands shook. You let her walk into the woods alone, knowing. She was afraid? He flinched. I didn't think it was real. She was dramatic. Always spinning stories. She was 16, Dana's voice cracked. Of course she was dramatic. That doesn't mean she was lying. Noah sat down heavily on the arm of the couch, head in his hands. I should have said something. I thought it was teenage stuff. Some boy, school drama, I didn't think. Did she say who it was? He shook his head. No, just that it was someone who shouldn't be watching. I pressed her, but she clammed up. Said it didn't matter. Dana's eyes brimmed. But it did matter. I didn't think she'd go back out there alone, he murmured. She wasn't supposed to. A silence fell between them. The air thick with years of grief, regret, and unspoken blame. Dana turned toward the window, staring out at the rain. Max found her necklace, she said quietly, 3 days ago, tangled in his collar. Noah looked up, startled. I never told you, but that necklace... Ellie wore it every single day since she was 10. She never took it off. And now it comes back? 3 years later? Her voice trembled. It's like she's reaching out? Noah swallowed hard. What do you think it means? Dana turned to him slowly. I think she was followed. I think someone watched her for weeks, maybe longer. And I think she knew, Noah blinked. You think whoever she was afraid of took her? I don't know. Her voice was steady. Now, but hollow, but I'm going to find out. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside had softened, wind sighing against the windows. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Noah finally asked, What do you want from me? Names, Dana said flatly. Anyone she talked about, anyone she avoided, any fights she had. Friends, teachers, your co-workers, I wanted it all. Noah looked uneasy. You think it was someone from town? She said someone close. Someone trusted. He nodded reluctantly. All right, I'll help you. But, Dana, be careful. If someone really did take her, I already lost her once, Dana whispered. I'm not afraid anymore. She left him standing at the door, rain misting against her coat as she stepped back into the evening. The walk to the car felt heavier than when she'd arrived, but a grim purpose had replaced the fog of grief. For the first time in years, she had something more than just pain. She had a direction. As she turned onto the main road, her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor. You need to come back. Max is barking like crazy. He won't stop staring at the backyard fence. Dana's heart dropped. The next turn wasn't toward home. It was toward the truth. The rain had stopped. Dana sat motionless in her car outside the small cafe on the edge of the college campus, engine idling, heart rattling in her ribs. She had driven 3 hours with nothing but the sound of Ellie's diary pages whispering in her head, echoing the terror between the lines. The entries were fragmented, missing like Ellie's presence, but enough remained to stir up a name Dana hadn't thought of in a while. Marcy Lang, Ellie's best friend. Or she used to be. Inside the cafe. Marcy looked different. Older, her once dark hair now streaked with blonde highlights, her face thinner, more guarded. She spotted Dana immediately, her posture tightening as if bracing for impact. Mrs. Harper, she said softly, sliding into the booth. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Dana didn't waste time. You were her best friend? You knew things I didn't. I read what's left of her diary. She was scared. She was hiding something. Someone. Marcy's hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee. I thought I was protecting her. Protecting her from what? Dana asked, voice sharper than she intended. Marcy hesitated, eyes darting to the window like she wanted to run. He was older, not by a little, by a lot. I didn't know his name. Ellie never said it, but she met him around the trail. And she said he made her feel seen, that he understood her. Dana felt something inside her begin to shake. How old? I don't know. Mid-30s, maybe more. He had this way of getting in her head. At first, she'd giggle about it, but then she got weirdly defensive. She started skipping school, canceling our plans. She was obsessed with keeping it a secret. Dana clenched her jaw. And you never told me? I tried, Marcy said, her voice cracking. I told her to stop seeing him. I told her it wasn't safe, that he gave me a bad feeling, but she just shut me out. The last time we talked, we fought. I told her I'd tell someone if she didn't stop, and she said if I did, she'd make sure I regretted it. So I didn't. Dana's fingers curled around her paper cup, knuckles white. I thought maybe she'd just gotten mad at me, Marcy went on. When she disappeared, I kept thinking she'd show up, that she'd laugh and say we were all overreacting. She never came back, Dana said hollowly. Marcy wiped her eyes. I lied to the police. I told them I didn't know anything. I was scared. Dana stared at her. You could have helped us find her. You might have saved her. I know. Marcy whispered, her voice barely audible. I've lived with that every day. Dana's throat tightened. She remembered Ellie's laugh echoing through the house. The way she'd twirl her hair when nervous, the way she always defended underdogs, even if it got her in trouble. Did she ever say what he looked like? Dana asked. Marcy shook her head. No, just that he drove a dark green truck, always parked far down the trail near the service road. She said he didn't want anyone to see them together. A chill rippled through Dana's chest. Marcy looked up at her. Do you think he took her? I don't know yet, Dana replied, but I intend to find out. They sat in silence for a long moment before Dana rose, leaving a 20 on the table. Marcy didn't try to stop her. As Dana walked to her car, the pieces started sliding together. Ellie's fear, Max returning with her necklace, the shed in the woods, Noah's silence, and now this, a man hiding in plain sight, manipulating her daughter, a predator who'd stolen more than just time. Back home, the storm had blown over. The air was cooler, clearer. Dana stepped into Ellie's room, still preserved like a shrine, posters curling at the edges, a sweatshirt still hanging on the back of the chair. Her diary lay open where Dana had left it. She flipped through again, stopping at a line she hadn't read clearly the first time. He said no one would believe me anyway. Her stomach turned. She sat down heavily, heart thundering. Who was he? She thought of the men in town. A small town like Elkwood didn't have many strangers. Someone had seen something. Someone had known something. And she'd been too drowned in grief to ask the right questions until now. Then Max began barking in the backyard, a single, sharp bark. Then another. Dana rose slowly, walking to the back door. The porch light flickered. Max stood at the edge of the woods again, his nose pointing toward the trees, low growl in his throat. And this time, he wasn't looking at the trail, he was staring at something deeper in the woods, something new. Dana stepped out slowly, barefoot on damp grass. What is it, boy? Max barked again, sharper now. That's when she saw it, a faint glimmer of light. Not from a flashlight, from something metallic. Half buried, unearthed. Her breath caught, because Max was standing over what looked like a license plate. Green. Rusting. And underneath the dirt clinging to its edge, just barely visible, was the imprint of a vehicle number, and that number would change everything. Dana sat on the edge of her bed, Ellie's diary open in her lap, the scent of old paper and dried tears heavy in the air. Her fingers trembled as she turned the last legible page. The name wasn't written, but it didn't have to be. The dots were too clear now, too impossible to ignore. Shane. The name echoed in her skull like a bell struck in a dead church. Shane, Noah's stepson from his first marriage. 23, smug, distant, barely around. Ellie had never spoken much about him, but now Marcy's hesitance made cruel sense. The older guy Ellie had been seeing, the one she'd warned her about. Dana stood slowly, diary clutched against her chest. Her legs felt heavy, like the air around her had thickened with secrets. Outside, clouds rolled in again. Another storm was coming. She hadn't seen Shane in over 3 years, not since Ellie's disappearance. Back then, he had offered her cold denial, his words calculated and clipped. "I barely knew her," he had said to the police. "She was a kid. Why would I talk to her?" He'd left town shortly after, taking his silence with him. But now Dana wondered, had the police ever pressed him? Really pressed? The next morning she drove to Noah's old family cabin, the one Shane had inherited after his mother passed away. It sat at the edge of town, nestled behind skeletal trees, forgotten like an old wound. Moss crawled up the stone foundation, and the porch sagged with neglect. She parked at the bottom of the gravel path, Max at her side, alert and tense. Every step toward the house felt like walking into a fog of memories. Christmas visits, summer barbecues Ellie at age 10 catching, fireflies by the porch light, Shane sitting on the steps, phone in hand, ignoring it all. The door was ajar. Dana hesitated. "Shane?" she called, her voice carried by the wind. No answer. Inside, the house smelled of dust and oil. Boxes were stacked against the walls, some marked Mom, some books, and one half open, labeled photos. She knelt by it, pushing the lid aside. Old Polaroids curled with age, but some faces were still visible. Ellie and Shane in one picture. Ellie sat on the cabin swing, her head tilted back in laughter. Shane stood behind her, hands on the chains, smiling. Dana had never seen this photo. Her fingers tightened around the edge, heart pounding, looking for something. The voice came from behind. Dana turned sharply. Shane stood in the doorway, taller, leaner, but that same unreadable expression sat on his face. His eyes flicked to the box, then to her. "You kept these?" she asked, keeping her tone flat. "They were Mom's," he replied. "I didn't throw them out. That would have felt wrong." He stepped inside, brushing rain from his shoulders. "You shouldn't be here, Dana." She held up the photo. "Why was this never shown to the police?" Shane looked at it for a beat too long. "I don't know, it's just a picture." "She was 16, Dana said, her voice sharpening. "And you were 23? Don't tell me it's just a picture." Shane leaned against the wall, eyes narrowing. "You think I had something to do with what happened to her? I think she was scared and hiding something, and that you were part of it?" His jaw twitched. Ellie was complicated. "You don't want to hear that about your daughter? But it's true. She liked playing games, secrets, drama." "She wasn't dramatic," Dana hissed. "She was a child." Shane didn't answer. Max growled softly, low and uncertain. Dana noticed how Shane tensed at the sound. "You know something?" she said, stepping closer. "You knew she was afraid. You knew something happened." "I know she lied to a lot of people," Shane replied, his voice colder now. "Maybe even you." Dana didn't blink. "Where were you the day she vanished?" "I was here. Cleaning." "Out Mom's stuff?" asked Noah. He knew. Dana stared at him, unwilling to let it end there. "If you're lying, I will find out. I don't care how many years it's been." Shane shrugged, but there was a flicker, a shadow, in his eyes. "Then I guess you'd better start digging." He stepped past her and out into the rain, disappearing down the gravel drive. Dana stood there, soaked in silence. Her mind buzzed with possibilities, truths half-spoken. She glanced back into the box and noticed something else beneath the photos, a folded piece of lined paper. Tucked in the corner, she unfolded it carefully, a note in Ellie's handwriting, 4 words. He said, "Stay quiet." Dana's breath hitched. The paper trembled in her hand. The wind howled through the broken window. Outside, Max began barking, sharp, frantic. Dana rushed out to find him clawing at the wet ground near a crooked garden bed. A glint of something metallic was just barely visible in the mud. She dropped to her knees, a small charm bracelet, Ellie's, and next to it, bones. Tiny, human, and not alone. Rain had soaked the leaves overnight, leaving the forest slick and silent, as if it too were holding its breath. The same mist Dana had walked through days ago curled low around the trees. This time she wasn't alone. 2 squad cars sat at the edge of the trail, their tires sunk into the soft earth. Yellow tape marked off the path that twisted toward the abandoned hunting shed. Officers moved slowly, combing the area, gloved hands brushing through ivy, scraping under moss. Max, leashed by a deputy, sniffed with restless energy near the edge of the clearing. Dana stood to the side, arms folded tight over her chest. She hadn't wanted to see this place again, but the detectives insisted. "You were the one who found the necklace," they'd said. "You know this area better than anyone now." Behind the shed, where the grass thinned and the soil turned to hardened clay, an officer knelt. "Over here!" he called out. Others rushed over. Dana's breath caught in her throat. She moved closer, heart pounding. The fire pit was shallow, just a circle of blackened earth and old rocks, but inside it, things whispered of something dark and long buried. A notebook's corner, half burned and curled like an old leaf. Several more pieces of torn, ash-covered paper, bits of bone. Some animal, maybe. Maybe not. And then pink, a single melted bead sat in the ashes, then another. And another. Dana's knees nearly buckled. Her hand flew to her mouth. The charm. Bracelet. Ellie's. It had been a birthday gift from Dana's sister. 1 bead added every year since she was 5. Detective Lawson crouched beside the pit, carefully lifting the bracelet piece with tweezers. "Is this hers?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Dana nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. She never took it off. The investigation that had lain cold for years, frozen in grief, in denial, was now cracking open like the forest floor itself. What was once a missing persons case was shifting into something darker. Something final. At the police station, Dana sat across from Lawson, staring blankly at the bagged evidence on the table. There wasn't much. Yet a few scorched notebook pages with smeared ink. One fragment had the word "afraid" still legible. Another held the half words, "before it disappeared into ash." And then there were the bones. "They're sending the remains to forensics," Lawson said gently. "We won't know if they're human until the lab confirms." Dana closed her eyes. "I already know," Lawson studied her. "You think Shane was involved?" Dana opened her eyes. "I don't know what I think. But Ellie was scared of someone she knew. Someone close." Her voice trembled. "And now this." The detective nodded slowly. "We'll be bringing him in for questioning." Dana looked out the window. The sun was breaking through the clouds now, glinting weakly off the pavement. She thought of Ellie, her laugh, her late-night tea mugs left half-finished, her humming through the house, and then the diary pages, the silver necklace, the fire pit, pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve. That night she stood again. In Ellie's bedroom? The walls were still the soft lilac Ellie had chosen at 13. Posters still hung slightly crooked. Her bed untouched. Dana sat at her daughter's desk, her fingers tracing the wood. She pulled out the drawer again. The hidden latch she'd found days ago still stuck slightly. Inside, only one thing remained, a crumpled piece of lined paper wedged in the corner. Somehow missed before, she unfolded it. her fingers shaking, Ellie's handwriting quick and rushed. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident? I was right. He promised not to tell. But I saw it in his eyes. He wanted to hurt me. He said if I told Mom, he'd disappear me. Please, if you find this, tell her. Tell her I was telling the truth. No name. No date. But Dana didn't need one. Tears fell silently onto the paper. Downstairs, Max barked once. Then again, Dana rose slowly, heart in her throat. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, and froze. A car she didn't recognize had just pulled. Up outside, a man stepped out, tall, familiar. Shane. He was back. The air in the police station felt heavier than usual. Dana sat across from Detective Marlowe, a printed stack of digital records spread out before them. Marcy had finally forwarded the emails. Some had been buried in a dormant account, tucked away behind layers of forgotten passwords and teenage guilt. But now, with the forensic team's help, they were readable and damning. There were screenshots of texts, dated 6 months before Ellie vanished. Shane, you're not like other girls. You're different. You see me, Ellie. You make me feel safe. Like someone gets me. Shane, you're not a kid. You get me. But you can't tell anyone. Promise? Dana's throat tightened. She traced the printed message with her finger, as if the ink could explain the emptiness that had followed her daughter's disappearance for 6 years. It didn't. He was grooming her, Marlowe said, voice low. Textbook behavior, gained trust, isolated her, then threatened her silence. Dana blinked at the paper. Why didn't I see it? Marlowe didn't answer. Instead, he turned to a separate file, Ellie's browser history, partially recovered from her old laptop. A search stood out. How to tell someone an adult is hurting you. She was trying, Dana whispered. She wanted out. 2 weeks later, she was gone. The timeline was brutally clear now. Shane, Noah's stepson, had inserted himself into Ellie's life gradually, quietly. He came by less often than family, more often than a stranger. A mentor at first, then something else. He was 23, Ellie was 16. Dana remembered the time Ellie came home from the movies with Marcy, flustered and quiet. She'd brushed it off as teenage moods, but maybe that was the night something happened. The night Ellie had started to pull away. From everyone, she recalled a note Ellie had scribbled once and tucked behind a photo frame. He says I'm mature, but I just want to be a kid again. Dana had found it a month after the disappearance and assumed it was about school stress, everything. Felt like a missed sign now. Marlowe tapped the printed messages again. We also found an unsent draft in Shane's email from the day after Ellie vanished. Subject: sorry. Body: I didn't mean for it to go this far. She said she'd ruin me. I panicked. I just wanted her to stop talking. It never sent. But he'd written it, he panicked, Dana murmured. Because she said she'd tell. Marcy's emails added another chilling detail. A few weeks before Ellie disappeared, she had confided something cryptic. He's not who I thought he was. I think, I made a mistake. I'm going to tell someone. She never got the chance. There were also photos recovered from Ellie's school. Locker, a torn picture of Shane with the eyes scratched out. A journal entry half erased. He says love hurts sometimes. But not like this. Not like this. Dana could barely breathe as she read it. Her daughter had been caught in a storm no one saw coming. Not even her own mother. She was scared, Dana whispered. And he made sure no one believed her. Outside the station, the sky had turned gray. Rain tapped softly against the window. Dana stared out, thoughts spiraling. She imagined Ellie in the woods, frightened but hopeful. Trying to be brave. Trying to get away. She fought, Dana said aloud. Even when no one saw it, she fought. Marlowe nodded, quiet. We're filing charges, he said. With what we've recovered and the new forensic evidence from the fire pit, there's enough to bring Shane in for questioning, and maybe more. Dana stood slowly, the printed messages still in her hands. As she stepped into the corridor, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. You don't know the whole story. Her blood ran cold. Without stopping, she turned back toward Marlowe's office. Whoever's protecting him, she said, they're not done. And neither was she. The morning of the memorial was painted in soft gray clouds. The town of Windmere, once a quiet name on the map, stood still as bells rang faintly through the fog. People gathered slowly around the small chapel, clutching white roses. Heads bowed not in curiosity, but reverence. Dana stood near the entrance, her hands trembling. As she held Ellie's necklace, now polished, its once charred charm glinting in the faint light. The clasp had been repaired, but its center, a small heart locket, bore a scorched edge, a scar it would carry forever. Just like Dana, Shane's arrest 2 days prior had rippled through the community. The town's whispers were no longer about the mystery of the missing girl, but about the horror that had lived among them unnoticed. A predator hiding in family dinners, birthday parties, and school recitals. A boy they'd once called polite. A young man who had smiled too easily. Max, Ellie's aging golden retriever, lay curled beneath a pew, tail occasionally thumping the wooden floor. Since they'd recovered the bracelet, he hadn't left Dana's side. And now, in this chapel, he rested beside the small white coffin that bore his girl's name. Dana stepped up to the podium. The church fell into silence, broken only by the rustle of paper as she unfolded her speech, though she hardly needed it. I used to think silence was the worst part, she began, her voice raw but clear. The unanswered questions. The night spent watching the driveway, hoping she'd come home. The ache of not knowing, but I was wrong. Her eyes moved to the coffin, then to the townspeople, whose faces were streaked with tears. The worst part was thinking maybe she was forgotten, that her voice would never be heard again. She held up the necklace, but Ellie never stopped speaking. Not really. She spoke in memories, in the woods, in old diaries, in the people brave enough to finally tell the truth, and today, we're listening. A murmur of quiet affirmation moved through the chapel. Dana continued, her fingers tightening on the locket. She was only 16, but she had dreams bigger than this town. She wanted to become a writer. She once told me, I want to write things that matter, and she did, even when her words were torn out of pages and burned in fear. Even then they mattered. There was a soft sob from Marcy in the second row. Dana met her eyes and nodded gently, a gesture that said, you did right, you came forward. She was groomed, manipulated, lied to, but she was never weak. Never. Foolish, and she tried to speak, she tried to escape. She left us clues, and now, because of all that, justice has a name. It's hers. Dana stepped down slowly, each step heavy, each breath reminding her she had lived through something no parent should. The priest followed, leading a brief prayer. Then came the placing of items into the memory chest beside Ellie's coffin. Letters, drawings, a photo of her laughing in the backyard, and finally the necklace. Dana knelt, gently setting it down with a mother's care, her fingertips lingering over the locket one last time. As the coffin was lowered, the town stood. White roses were laid one by one until the small grave became a field of mourning and love. That night, Dana sat on her back porch, wrapped in a blanket. The forest at the edge of her yard rustled with the same soft sounds she had once feared, but now it felt different. Not peaceful exactly, but still a new kind of quiet. She looked down at Max, his head resting on her foot, and whispered, "We brought her home." She closed her eyes, imagining Ellie's voice, not the frightened tone in her diary, or the panicked texts Shane had twisted into silence, but her true voice. The one Dana remembered from long car rides, kitchen dance parties, and whispered, "Bedtime thoughts. Love you, Mom. Don't forget to feed Max." A soft smile touched her lips. In the distance, sirens no longer echoed. The case was closed. Shane awaited trial. Evidence, overwhelming and damning, left little doubt about his fate. But this moment wasn't about him. It never had been. Dana got up, walked inside, and paused by Ellie's bedroom door. She opened it gently. The room had been left mostly untouched. A small desk, fairy lights along the wall, a bookshelf filled with young adult novels and worn journals. On the windowsill sat a framed photo, Ellie hugging Max, cheeks puffed in a fake pout, eyes sparkling. Dana whispered, "Your voice was never silent, baby. I just had to learn how to listen." The forest beyond the window swayed. Mist drifted through the trees, and somewhere beneath that endless canopy, a story had ended, but another, one about healing, truth, and the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, had just begun. It rained on the morning they laid Ellie to rest. Not the kind of stormy, angry rain that beat down like punishment, but something quieter, misty, respectful, like the sky had been holding back until this moment. Dana stood at the edge of the small memorial plot, surrounded by neighbors, friends, former teachers. Even those who hadn't known Ellie well had come. In a town like theirs, grief didn't need an invitation. The town square had been transformed. A white canopy stretched over the stone platform where the small wooden casket rested. Beneath it, Ellie's necklace, the one Max had unearthed, now whole again, glistened on a velvet cloth. Someone had carefully cleaned the ash from each bead. The tiny heart charm hung perfectly centered, as if waiting for its rightful place. All this time, Max lay curled beside the casket, unmoving, his chin resting on his front paws. He hadn't left Ellie's side since they arrived. Dana adjusted the microphone with trembling hands. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Not because she didn't know what to say. She had rehearsed it 100 times, but because the moment had finally come. Her daughter's voice, silenced in life, was about to be heard in death. When Ellie was a baby, Dana began, her voice catching. She used to hum to herself before falling asleep. No song, just sounds, but they were hers. She always had a voice, even before she had words. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at the edges of her shawl. Somewhere in the crowd, someone sniffled. Even when she was afraid, she spoke. To her friends, to people she trusted, she tried to be heard. But too many of us dismissed what she was saying. Dana's gaze flickered across the small sea of faces, familiar and unfamiliar alike. I thought I was protecting her, but I wasn't listening. She paused, her hand resting on the necklace. Ellie wasn't just a daughter. She was a girl who laughed too loudly at her own jokes. She painted stars on her ceiling. She believed in people even when she shouldn't have. And when someone betrayed that belief, she didn't know how to carry it. Dana didn't name Shane. She didn't need to. Everyone knew the trial would follow and the details would come out. But today wasn't for him. She isn't just gone. She's remembered. And not as a tragedy. As a voice that tried to speak the truth even when no one was ready to hear it. She stepped down as the ceremony closed. The casket was lowered. A silence fell over the square, broken only by a few sobs and the faint call of crows. In the distance, Dana knelt beside Max, who nudged his head against her leg. "She was your girl too, huh?" Dana whispered, running her hand over his fur. "Thank you." That evening, the town lit candles, a tradition for lost children. Windows flickered with soft yellow light. At Dana's house, photos of Ellie lined the mantel. Ellie in her Halloween witch hat. Ellie holding a snow globe. Ellie blowing out birthday candles. It was both comforting and cruel. In the corner of her room, Ellie's old diary now sat beside the cleaned charm bracelet. The police had returned it, along with the remaining pages that hadn't burned. Most of it was damaged, but one page remained intact. Dana had memorized the words. I don't think love is supposed to feel like this. It's like I'm holding a secret that's eating me. But I can't tell Mom. She hate me. I just want to go back to when things were safe. Dana traced the writing with her fingers. She hadn't hated her. She had only failed to see. That night, she dreamed of Ellie, not as she'd been in the news reports or the missing posters, but as a child. Again, standing in the backyard with muddy hands, holding a jar of fireflies. Her eyes sparkled. She looked free. I'm okay now, Ellie said. Dana woke in tears. Weeks passed. The trial date loomed. Shane remained behind bars, his manipulation exposed through emails, text logs, and testimony. The town moved on in some ways, but not in others. Children walked to school with tighter grips on their parents' hands. Teachers reminded students they could talk to anyone. Dana started volunteering at the high school twice a week, sharing Ellie's story. One afternoon, she found a folded note in her mailbox. No return address. Just 2 words in neat, careful writing. She mattered. Dana smiled through the ache. In her chest, back at the cemetery, flowers had begun to bloom around Ellie's resting place. Someone had planted lavender. Others left ribbons, notes, drawings. And one day, Dana found a handmade bracelet, pink beads strung on wire, one missing in the middle. She placed it beside the necklace. Before she left, she whispered, "Your voice is still here, baby. It always will be." And as she turned to leave, Max trotting beside her, the wind stirred the grass like a breath. Not loud, not forced, just a whisper, but enough to be heard.